Hello again, everyone. Todd Michael Putnam from D&D Creative Table Designs, bringing you another adventure table idea, and this is Captured by Kobolds. Captured by Kobolds. This is actually the first adventure that I ran for my new campaign. I just ran it yesterday. My new campaign is called Creatures in Catacombs, which is named after the homebrew rule set that I used for 5e to make D&D a little bit more grimdark and challenging. And the idea is in Creatures in Catacombs, the players don't start off as first level adventurers. They start off as 0 level apprentices. They have 5 hit points. If they're spellcasting class, they have only 1 cantrip. They don't have any of their skills. They don't have their proficiencies or anything, and they basically have to survive the first mission in order to become first level adventurers. And so they were captured on a merchant caravan that they were supposed to be guarding. They were captured by kobolds who had a cruel and clever pit trap, basically, that yanked out from under the road, causing the entire wagon to drop down about 25 feet. And then the kobolds swarmed around from the top and just took over the caravan, and took everybody prisoner. And when they woke up, they were here in this nasty little prison cell with their former mentors were in this cell here, and the players were in this cell here with the merchant themselves. And the kobolds were being mean and cruel, and they took their former masters and they cut their right hands off, and then they cauterized them in this forge over here. So because their former masters were the ones that were guarding at night, so they were the ones that were all dressed in armor, and obviously the ones to be threats. So once they beat them up and knocked them out and stuff, they chopped their right hand off. So for one reason, there's another reason, but for one reason, so that they knew that they would be unlikely to be able to resist or cause them problems in the future. The players and the merchant, on the other hand, were thrown in this other cell here because when the attack happened at night, the players were asleep, they didn't have their armor on, and so the kobolds just presumed that they were essentially part of the merchant caravan cargo, and not really a threat. And so they got thrown in there. They did manage to break their bonds out, and they managed to grab one of the kobolds and smack him up against the gate and beat him up, steal his key, and break out. And they were able to defeat the rest of the kobolds here and rescue their masters. But there weren't any weapons in here except for what the kobolds had on them, which was like some slings and some short swords and stuff like that. This over here is a small little bucket that was filled with hands that had been cut off, which seemed like a grim trophy thing, but it soon became apparent. Once they tried to escape, there was a gate here that they could pull the chain on, but it wasn't locked. You just pull the chain and it would, raise the gate up, and as soon as you let go of the chain, it would come back down again, which didn't seem very secure until they made it to the next room, which is the Carrion crawler pit. And basically, this pit had a carrion crawler in it, obviously, which is way above their level. They were not going to be able to defeat it. But it was strewn about with some dead bodies in various forms of decay and being eaten by this thing. And there's it's like a pit. It's about 15 feet or so deep that the carrion crawler is crawling around in. And there's a suspension bridge that goes across to the other side. And what the kobolds would do is when they hacked off people's hands, they would keep a number of them in that bucket. When they came across, they would literally throw the hands at the carrion crawler as almost like a toll in order to get through to the other side. So the players were able to eventually manage to distract the carrion crawler after some antics of trying to get across a swingy suspension bridge that was only designed to be roughly carry the weight of a kobold as opposed to full-grown humans. And they made it through. There was a similar gate on the other side with a similar bucket filled with hands. And they managed to get out, and they came around from this corner here. And this one, the passageway split off into 2 directions. One, there's a tiny little hole, if you can see, right there in that wall that they were just able to crawl through. And the other one was a passageway coming in this direction. They decided to explore this little hole here, and it comes to another small antechamber, and then natural stairs going up. And then this whole section here I didn't have on. I had this whole thing taken off, so it was all one level until they discovered this. and then I pulled this out of another room and out of my spare bedroom and brought this in. When they crawled up on over the top of it, they came across there's like a natural tunnel, and they looked down. There's a hole in there, and they looked down, and this room here is a guard, a kobold guard place. And so the kobolds were watching in either direction, and there's another one here. Well, they decided to split up their team, and two of the players came rushing in from this side, and the other two stayed up top and either used their sling or cast spells at it, and they were able to take out the kobolds. Then there was a way out of this room here, and it would split. There's a small antechamber to the right, and then to the left, it went off down a passageway. But they opted instead for going from the top here. They saw that there was some stairs going, not really stairs, like natural climb way going down. So they managed to climb down because they figured the kobolds didn't likely use this, and wherever they're going, maybe instead of armed resistance of kobolds, they might just have like natural predators in the caves. They decided to go for that. So they followed this pathway around here. They came across a small brackish pool of water that had mushrooms and stuff in it. And they did a nature check, but without the actual, this is like role-playing them learning their skills. And so they rolled to check, and the ranger was able to discover that these are actually shriekers. But I homebrewed the stuff. As long as the players didn't enter the actual water, they wouldn't go off. So they managed to work their way around here. Oh, I'm sorry. They did discover a body that was right there, cropped over, and he had a small elixir in his hand that he looked like he was trying to pop open and take, but he died from his wounds. His wounds looked like he had been bitten. So they took the elixir, and then they worked their way along the outside edge, being careful not to actually go into the water itself, and avoided the shrieker mushrooms, which make this loud piercing noise that would warn anything in the cavern, which was a good thing. And then they started going through this larger cavern here, and they saw webbing and stuff all over the place, and they heard skittering sound up above. So they realized there must be like a giant spider or something that's up there. So they were all making their stealth checks, which is basically a pure dexterity check at the level they were at, trying to sneak their way past and come around to this section here. However, one of the NPCs, one of their former mentors, failed his stealth check, and a giant web comes shooting down and grabbed him, and then started basically pulling him along, and was going to pull him up to become Spider Snack. And the heroes, they had one cantrip, so they firebolted it, and they hacked away with their sword and managed to save their brethren. The spider came down, and they were actually able to defeat the spider, and they decided to climb up to the top to see what was in its nest, and they got some old suits of armor and stuff, and some weapons, and so they got their original weapons from the kobold. From the Kobold guard chamber. I neglected to say in here there were a couple of weapon racks, so when they defeated these guys, they managed to get some weapons, but they didn't have any armor. So sorry about that. And then when they got up here, they managed to get a couple sets of old, ill-fitting armor, but it was better than nothing. So they managed to get some stuff from armor there, so they were a little bit better armed. And then as they went through, came back down, and they followed these twisty, turning tunnels here, there were nets that were hung up all through there, but like real easy. They were just on hooks on the side of the natural cavern. So like going through, you just unhook the net from the side of the wall, and you got through very easily. It wasn't any kind of a problem. And clearly these had been set up to stop the spider from going through, because any humanoid would be smart enough to be able to just unhook them the way they were. So there are multiple series of nets to try and keep the spiders off. Eventually, they came around to a cavern, and then they saw there was the first humanoid-made opening that it looked like some kind of worked stone, and that there was a collapsed wall that was there. So they heard some chanting noises, and then they came up, and they snuck into this chamber here, where there were 3 kobolds that were dressed in robes that were chanting, and they were getting ready to sacrifice somebody on their altar. And then there was also some other prisoners that were kept in this cage over here. So players came bursting through, and they attacked these guys, and the only spell that these kobolds had, again, I homebrew this stuff, was the Vicious Mockery cantrip, which does 1 to 4 points of damage and puts them at disadvantage. But they did really good. They did great on their rolls, and the kobolds did terrible on their rolls. All my rolls are public, so none of the Vicious Mockeries lasted, or landed, I should say, and they were able to defeat them, and they managed to save these two individuals. And then when they came, and there was a little bit of treasure that was here too. They got quite a bit of gold and stuff. And then when they exited, they checked out this doorway here, I should say, and this doorway just looped back and went to the guard chamber that was down here. And that's the natural way that the kobolds went through stuff. When this section of the wall over here collapsed when they were creating it, they found out the hard way that there was a spider in those caverns. So that's why the kobolds put the nets up along in this area to prevent the spider from coming through. That's why they weren't expecting anyone to come through this doorway. They would expect the only one, they thought it was secure. The only way, they thought anyone could come through would be that doorway or this other one here. So when the players came stealthily through this one and burst onto the scene, they were able to catch the kobolds by surprise. So there was a payoff. Besides the extra worn armor and stuff that they got, there was a payoff for tactic surprise by taking that alternate route. Then they headed down the stairs, and in this room is where the kobolds stored all of the players' actual armor. The armor that they purchased and had not yet been able to use because they'd been captured and stuff before they got to fight or anything. So they originally got all of their armor back and all of their real weapons back from the first start of their characters, and so they were good on that. So now they had their weapons and their armor. They made it through this cave here, which nothing actually happened, but there was a sound. It was like a hissing or rushing water sound, but they weren't sure what it was from. Find out about that soon enough. This whole cavern, it extends so I said out in this direction, the cavern seemed to extend for a very long way, but they could immediately see that there was an opening over here, which was probably going to lead them closer to the surface, which is what they were trying to do, escape. So but they could always come back. I'll go back to this later, but they could always come back and go in this direction and explore more if they wanted. Up the stairs and then into this room here, which was the common room for the kobolds, just filled with women and children and little rats and stuff like that, who they just formed a defensive circle and just were like trying to let the players go through because they were all unarmed. It was an opportunity to see if they were going to commit war crimes or not, which none of them did, which is nice. None of the players wanted to commit war crimes. They left the women and children alone, and they just snuck their way through this. I shouldn't say snuck, but they worked their way through this room. There is a door right here that opens up, and that leads to this area where that sound was coming from, the rushing water of the giant natural cavern. And they had to work their way along this pathway. And of course, with the rushing water and stuff, it's a slick surface. It's solid, unlike the Kobold Bridge before. It's made out of rock, so it's not going to give way. But they had to make dex checks in order to not fall in. And the river was rushing very, very fast. So if you fell in, you were not going to swim against it. You were going to get sucked downstream somewhere. They did not know where because all this was covered up. If you look at the pictures, you'll see that I have a little black poster board that I literally cover this entire thing up with, so that the map is only revealed as the players get to certain areas. So anyways, they tied themselves off to one another with ropes here. The halfling fell in 3 times and was fished out, but nobody actually got lost. And after some time, they managed to work their way up to this cavern set here. They did sneak up and listen, and this area over here they found was filled with kobolds who were doing mining. They had little picks and stuff, and there was something that they did miss. There was a box filled with semi-precious gems. The kobolds were mining for the proper rocks that they would use to build other areas of the dungeon like this, to build that kind of stuff. But of course, when they find semi-precious gems, they would keep them. So there's a little box there with that. The players did not go in this direction, though. Instead, they decided to go check up these natural stairs that are right here. pan back to see where that came from. This is where the walkway over the bridge over the river, underground river, was from. Then they go up these stairs here, and in this last section, there were kobold undead skeletons that apparently had been raised by those former spellcasting kobolds, and through vile magics, and so they had to defeat the undead skeletons and work their way up finally to this area here, going out, and that's the mouth of the cave. That was the end of the adventure because that they had worked to freedom. And so the way my campaign works, I have a whole world, but it's not all fleshed out. And what I do at the end of every session, which is what I did at the end of this last session, is I said, okay, guys, where do you want to go? Do you want to just finish taking the guys to town? And so, that way your rescued prisoners, that you want to bring them to town, or do you want to just head out into the forest and do exploring? Do you want to go back into the caverns? And next session, this section here, which I said expanded out into into be more caverns and stuff. Endless. Do you want to go explore those and do that, or do you want to just come back with a boat or something and follow this river downstream and see where the underground river goes? What do you guys want to do? They elected they wanted to go back to town, so the next session that I have, which will be a month from now, we only play once a month. That's going to be a town adventure, and it's up to me to come up with an adventure that happens in that town. I won't say what any of my ideas are because I haven't settled on what they might be, and I'll post this video long before that session happens, and I want to give my players a heads up. So that's where the agency comes in. They can choose to go and do whatever they want to do, and when they do that, I'll build a setup somewhat like this. Of course, it'll be a town setup, and we'll go through that. At the end of that one, there'll be stuff that drops. They could find a note that could lead them somewhere, or a treasure chest or something. An NPC could give them a piece of information they want to follow up at another location, and they decide to go there, or they could head back to the coast and sign up with privateers and decide they want to go hunt pirates. Whatever they want to do is fine with me. And I've got 3 more weeks to come up with a mission, an adventure for them. So that's it. That was Captured by Kobolds. This entire session was recorded. It was fantastic until I checked the audio and the microphone had somehow been set wrong, and there was this constant buzzing noise and you couldn't hear anything anybody was saying. So I was rather dismayed and disappointed by that. I'm going to see if I can correct that technical difficulty so that the next sessions can be recorded and you guys can watch them. Sorry this one's so long. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe and ring that bell notification. I usually have a new one coming up every single week, so you won't miss any of those. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the channel and lets me know that you guys enjoy the content. Thank you so much. Happy New Year, and I'll see you next adventure. Take care. Bye.